Alright, welcome everyone to Amigos Code. My name is Nelson, and in this video I'm going to show you exactly how to use Spring Boot and connect to a real database. So if you've missed my crash course on Spring Boot, go ahead and check it out, because in that video this is what I teach. So I teach you how to build this N-tier architecture application where you have several layers. So the idea is that a client issues requests, and these could be GET requests, post, delete, and puts. And basically you have this layer right here which takes those requests and then sends it to the service layer. And the service layer simply does some business logic. And then we also have the database layer, which is responsible for interacting with your database. So if you've missed the first part of this crash course, go ahead and check it out, because you will learn a lot of cool things that you can do with Spring Boot. But in that first part, what we did was we implemented an in-memory database using a list. So in this second part, what I want to do really is just show you how easy it is for you to switch your implementation to a real database. And for this, you could even use MongoDB, Redis, Postgres, MySQL, Cassandra, whatever database of your choice really. But for this video, what I decided to do really is to ignore all of these databases, and we're going to connect to a Postgres database using Spring Boot 2. So go ahead and check out the first part of this crash course. Otherwise, if you have some experience with Spring Boot, what you need to do for this part is really to go to this GitHub repository, where I'm going to leave the link in the description below. And basically right here, this is the source code for the first part of this crash course. So go ahead and pretty much just clone or download this repository. So let me simply go ahead and clone this with SSH. But as I said, you can download this and open up with your favorite IDE. So talking about IDEs, if you are not using IntelliJ, then I suggest you to watch my video on how to get started with IntelliJ, because IntelliJ is by far the best IDE out there. And pretty much every single software engineer that I know, they use IntelliJ. So I'm going to go ahead and grab this link, and basically, as I said, so you can grab this repository, and I'm going to leave a link in the description below. So let me go ahead and grab that, and then let me go ahead and simply open up IntelliJ. So right here we have IntelliJ, and what I'm going to do is pretty much just check out from version control. So if you have your zip folder, simply extract that and then click on open, and then you can simply go ahead and open the POM file within that folder. So what I'm going to do is simply check out from version control, select Git, and then simply paste that URL. And you can see that it's going to save the actual project in my desktop. So let me test the connection. There we go, successful. Clone, and you can see that I've got this folder right here, and then simply say yes that you want to open the pom.xml. And there we go. So if I pretty much just expand this, and you can see the keyboard shortcut that I've used, which was Command and N1. So with IntelliJ, I love to use keyboard shortcuts because that's the way I write code really fast. So let me simply go ahead and walk you through again on this project structure. So inside, you can see that we have source, main, and then inside you have Java, and then you can see that we have these 4 folders, right? So we have API, DAO, model, service. So let me simply open up the API, and this is the actual controller. So right here, so you can see that this is how we pretty much just receive the, so if I put that like that, so this is pretty much how we receive requests from clients, and then we direct them to the actual service layer. So this part here is this one. So if I go back to my diagram, so is this API layer. So let me go back to IntelliJ and open a project, and then we have the service. So again, So this service simply does some business logic. You can see that it's nothing crazy, right? It simply directs some traffic and gets some data from the database. So again, we have the DAO layer, and right here we have the interface. So this is the actual interface that we implement. So right here we have fake person data access service, and this is the actual implementation. And basically right here you can see that we are using a map. So, and you can see I'm using streams to pretty much perform some filtering and remove so on and so forth. So if you've missed all of this, go ahead and check the very first part, because I teach you all of this. And then right here, what we also have is the actual person data access service. So right here, what we did, we pretty much just had this class right here, and we named it as Postgres, but pretty much this was a fake implementation. So you can see that I'm simply returning fake data. So in this select all people, you can see that I'm returning a person. And by the way, the model for this second part is also a person, right? So if I open up the model package, so right here you can see that we have a person that contains simply an ID and a name. So very straightforward. And let me go ahead and simply say enable auto import. So if I go back to person data access service, so right here you can see that this is pretty much just returning some fake data, right? And even select person by ID is returning an empty list. Delete person and update are returning 0. So if I go ahead and pretty much just open up demo application, and then right here, so this is the main method. So go ahead and simply press on this play button, or you can right click and then run. So just give me a second. There we go. You can see that the application is up and running, and you can see that Tomcat started on port 8080. So go ahead and pretty much just open up your web browser. And then right here, go ahead and simply say localhost and then 8080. And if I go back to IntelliJ, so I just want to show you the actual URL endpoint. So open up the person controller. And right here, you can see that it's API v1 and then person. So API, or actually /API, and then /v1 and then person. Enter, and there we go. So you can see that right here we are returning some fake data, right? But if I just pretty much just show you again that we are using dependency injection, and this is the powerful thing where you pretty much just write code against interfaces, is that you can then switch implementations without any issues. So if I open up the actual person service, so right here, so if I put this full screen, so right here you can see that I'm injecting the person DAO, so this is the actual interface, and then I'm saying that I want Postgres. So if you want to switch between implementations, all you have to do is simply change this name right here. So you can see that I've got this fake data access service, and this one is simply called fake DAO. So if I grab that and then go back to that class and then paste that in, and then if I restart, so if I restart, there we go. Now if I open up Chrome and then if I refresh, you can see that now I've got an empty list, and this is because I'm using an in-memory database, and initially it is set to empty, so there is no students inside of that database. So there we go. So basically this is just a walkthrough explaining you exactly what we did. So now let's actually go ahead and pretty much just use or actually connect to a real database. And the database engine that we're going to be using for this second part of this crash course is this amazing database engine called Postgres. So if you want to learn more about Postgres, you can go ahead and check my website, where I've got this PostgreSQL crash course, or actually it's a course about 4 hours long and it's absolutely free. So you can see the roadmap right here, and I cover the essentials that you need to know in order to be familiar with Postgres. And by far, Postgres is the best database out there. So go ahead and check it out, go ahead and enroll, and it's absolutely free. So if I go back to the diagram, so you can see that right here we have this data access layer, and instead of talking to a fake database, we're going to connect to a real database, which will be Postgres. So for this database, what I'm going to be using is Docker. So I'm going to use Docker and simply say Postgres, and go ahead and click on this very first link. And basically, if you don't know about Postgres and Docker, or Docker, go ahead and check my video. So I've got this video right here where I cover Docker and Postgres in about 10 minutes. So everything I'm going to teach you, you can find on this video. So if I close that, and basically it's really straightforward. So you can see that they have some description on what is Postgres, and basically this is how you start an instance once you have Postgres installed. So let me go ahead and simply grab this command right here. So let me just grab this command, and then go ahead and open up your terminal, iterm, or command line. So go ahead and simply open that up, and what I'm going to do is simply paste that in. So actually I didn't copy that, so let me just grab this and then paste that in. And basically what we're doing here, so just let me explain. So let's start from the very first command. So docker run, so this is the Docker command, and then I'm going to name this container as, so let me simply rename this to let's say Postgres, and then dash Spring. And then right here, so dash E is the environment variable, so we need that to set the actual password. So let's simply keep things simple and simply have a very weak password. So password, and then -d Postgres, and this is the actual image, and go ahead and simply change this to Postgres and then Alpine. So this is the smallest version. And then what we need to do is also expose a port. So we're going to take the port that is running inside of that Docker container, so 5432, and then expose that to the outside world as 5432. So basically what we're doing, so basically this -d is in detach mode. So as soon as I press enter, then we can carry on doing other things. So go ahead and check my video if you don't quite understand this, because I teach you all of this. So go ahead and simply press enter, and there we go. So now if I go ahead and simply say Docker and then PS, you can see that we have this container right here, and the name is Postgres Spring. So go ahead and simply say Docker and then port and then post and then gres dash spring, and you can see that we are exposing the container port to the outside world on localhost and then 5432. And by the way, 5432, this is a default port for Postgres. So now that we have a database, so we can log into it and then perform various things. So I'm going to show you exactly how to SSH into this box in a second, but for now you have a container running and exposing a port on 5432. So now what we need to do is actually go and open up IntelliJ, and let's actually connect to this database. So what I want to do is first revert this, because I want to connect to Postgres. And what we need to do is, if I actually stop that and then close that, so open up the resources. And by the way, I didn't mention that we have some tests right here. So if I open up tests, so you can see that I even took some time to write some tests to make sure that everything works. So let me go ahead and close this. And then what we're going to do is open up this application.properties. So application application.properties, this is where you define the connection details to your database. So go ahead and pretty much just delete the application.properties. So go ahead and delete application.properties. And inside, what I want really is a file, and simply call it application dot and then YAML. Well, actually, I could have simply renamed that to YAML, but it's fine. So, okay. And not for now. I'm going to commit this in a second so you can have everything on a branch. So now inside of this application.yaml, this is where we define all the connection details to our database. But before we do that, what we need to do is actually add some dependencies that will allow us to connect to databases, have the drivers, and then also give us the ability to write SQL commands against our database. So for that, what we need to do is open up pom.xml, and just let me collapse this for a second. And you can see some information about this project. I'm using Java 11. The version of Spring Boot is 2.13 release. And then you can see that we have some dependencies right here. So this is the actual dependency for Spring Boot Starter Web. So this gives you ability to have a Tomcat server up and running and write some APIs using Spring Boot MVC, so on and so forth. And then we have this one right here. So Spring Boot Starter Test for writing tests. And then we have this assert4j, which is pretty much an assertion library for writing unit tests. So the dependencies that we need are the following. So go ahead and simply add a new dependency. So I'm going to press enter, and you can see that now we can add a new dependency. So the first one that I need is from org.springframework.boot. So just let me grab that and then paste that in. And then the artifact ID that we need will be spring, and then dash, and then boot, dash, and then starter, and then dash JDBC. So let's actually duplicate this. And then what we need is org dot and then post and then GraphQL. And then the artifact ID is simply PostgreSQL. So just let me grab that. So that will be that. And then what we need is simply have a scope. And then this will be only at runtime. And finally, we need another dependency. And this time this will be org dot and then flyway. And I'm going to explain this in a second. And then db. And then what we need is simply fly and then way and then core. Or actually dash and then core, just like that. So all of these dependencies will allow us to connect to a database. And basically this is what allows us to write, or actually it gives us an awesome API that we can execute some statements against our database. This is for the actual driver, so PostgreSQL, and then this FlyAwayDB is for database migrations, and you will see this in a second. So now let me simply go ahead and open up the project tab, and then if I open up the demo application and then press play, you should see that we have an error, and the error simply says that failed to configure data source URL. Attribute is not specified and no embedded data source could be configured. So basically what we need to do now is simply to create a data source and inject the URL, username, and password, and then pretty much allow us to, and pretty much that will allow us to connect to our database. So let me go ahead and simply collapse this. And what we need to do first is let's simply go ahead and create a new package. So package, and then simply call it as data and then source. and then go ahead and press OK. And inside of this package, let's go ahead and simply create a new class, and then simply say Postgres and then data and then source. Press OK, and don't ask me again. I will add all of this later on. So this class will be served as a configuration. So add configuration, and what we're going to do inside of this class is simply return a data source. So public and then Ikari data source, and let's simply go ahead and name it as Ikari data source. And what we're going to do here is simply return a data source builder, and inside let's simply go ahead and say dot and then create, and then right here simply go ahead and say, and then simply go ahead and say dot and then type, and the type for this will be Ikari data source dot and then class, and then dot and then build. So you can see that now we have this data source, and what we need to do is simply say add and then bean, and what we need to do also is say configuration and then dot properties, and then what we're going to do is simply have app dot and then data and then source. So basically we are instantiating this Ikari data source as a bean, and then what we're going to do is create some configuration file that will contain the username, URL, password, so on and so forth. So let's go ahead and simply open up the application.properties, and inside of application.properties, what we need to do is simply do the following. So let's go ahead and have an app property, and inside of this app property we have data and then source, and then inside of data source what we need is jdbc-url, and this will be jdbc postgres QL /localhost, and then the port will be 5432, and then / and then we need to connect to a database. So we're going to create a database in a second, but for now let's simply name this as Spring and then boot and then dash and then postgres-db. It's a long name, but you get the point. So now we need a username. So the default username that ships with Postgres, it's called Postgres. We need a password, so password, and remember the password that we chose was password, and we can also define a pool size. So basically this is the number of connections that we can have actively instead of having to create a new connection to the database every time that we want to execute a query, against our database. So let's simply go ahead and add 30, and that should be it. So you can see that we have app data source, and inside of this data source package we have this Postgres data source, and basically it's just grabbing all the dependencies from this app and then data source. So just let me go ahead and start this because I want you to see the errors and you see exactly what is going on. So if I start the application, there we go. So now it says that cannot find migrations in location class path db and then migration. So what we need to do is to create a folder called db and then another one called migrations, and then have our database migrations inside it. So and this is basically Flyway, right? So Flyway allows us to manage our database schema as we evolve. So go ahead and pretty much just learn about Flyway right here. So Flyway, and basically you can read through the documentation, but it is straightforward. So just follow along and you will understand exactly what I'm doing. So if I close, or actually just let me keep that open. So if I go ahead and simply close this, or actually clear that, and then I've got this terminal right here. So I'm going to open this terminal, and if I do pwd, you can see that I'm inside of desktop Spring Boot YouTube crash course. So what I'm going to do is simply cd into src and then main, and then inside I've got resources. So inside, let me go ahead and make a folder. So make and then there, and what I need is db, cd into db, and then make another folder. So make dir, and then migrations. There we go. Enter. And basically you could have simply come here and pretty much just right click and then new and then directory and then db.migrations, but I prefer to use terminal, and you should also get used to it. So inside of db migrations, let's go ahead and create a file, and this file will be as follows. So version1 underscore underscore and then person table.sql. So make sure that this is as follows, because otherwise it won't work. So version1 underscore underscore person table.sql. Enter. Now let me ignore this extension. So this is where we can write some SQL. So let's go ahead and simply create table person, and then inside of this person we have an ID. So ID, and this is of type uid, and then this will be not and then null, primary, and then key. And then we also have, so if I open up the person class, we have the actual name. So if I go back, so this will be name, and then this is var char. So let's go ahead and simply add 100, not null. So this is enough. So now we have a table called person with the following columns, ID and name. So what I need to do now is actually go ahead and create our database. So if I open up the applications.yaml, so remember, so right here we have this database called Spring Boot Postgres-DB. So you can give it a better name, but I'm just giving this name so that you know exactly what we're doing. So what we need to do now is actually, so if I open up the terminal, and this is where I've got I've typed some Docker commands, and you saw that how we pretty much just launched this container which is running, and also exposing this port, so 5432. So this is the port that we are connecting, right? So localhost 5432. So let's actually go ahead and bash into this container and create a database. So simply go ahead and say docker and then exec and then dash and then IT for interactive. And then what we want is actually, if I grab this container ID and then simply say bin / and then bash, enter, and you can see that now we are inside of that box, or actually, and you can see that now we are inside of this container right here, which we can simply now run some commands. So go ahead and simply say psql. And you can see that we have psql working, and now we can write some psql commands. Again, if you've missed my course on psql, or actually Postgres, so on my website, so this is where I teach everything that you see me typing. And to be honest, you should learn Postgres. It's amazing, and a lot of companies are using it, and you can also use it for your personal project. So let me go ahead and simply go back to my terminal and simply go ahead and say psql dash and then capital U for Postgres. So remember, so this is the actual username, and then enter. And there we go. So you can see that now we are inside. So if I pretty much type backslash and then L, so if I clear the screen, backslash L, you can see that I do have 3 databases. So you can see list of databases. We have Postgres, template 0, and template 1. So let's go ahead and create a new database with this name. So let me grab this. And then if I type create, so caps, so create table, or actually database, and then paste the name, and that with semicolon, enter. Oh, okay. So we cannot have dash. So let me simply pretty much rename this to demo DB, right? So demo and then DB. Enter, and you can see that worked. Backslash L, and we have demo DB right here. So let's go back to IntelliJ, and let's simply rename this to demo DB. And now what we need to do is actually connect to this database. So let me connect inside. So backslash C and then demo DB, enter, and you can see that I'm connected to demo DB. So if I do backslash and then D, so to describe what we have in here. So backslash D, we haven't got anything. Backslash DT, you can see that there is no relations. So D is for everything, and then DT is for tables only. So now what I'm going to do is go back to IntelliJ, and let's go ahead and simply start our application. So let me actually go ahead and click on this icon right here, edit configurations, and let's go ahead and simply say that we only want one single instance running at a time. So if you press play multiple times, it means that you will only get the same process and not get 2 processes. And then you get like a weird error saying that the port is already in use. So we don't want that. So go ahead and simply now play. And we have an error, and it says cannot find migrations in ClassPath DB migration. And that's because I've misspelled migration. I've typed migrations instead of migration. So just let me rename that. So migration, and then refactor. There we go. And then start the application. And there we go. So you can see that everything started fine. And basically right here, you can see that we have Ikari pool started and then completed. And then we have a database, demo database right here. And you can see that we have migrating schema, so person table. So basically that was executed. So our command was executed correctly. And you can see that the migration was applied. And now we have the server running on port 8080, which is awesome. So now, so if I pretty much go back to my terminal, so I just want to show you something first. So remember previously we typed \d and \dt, and that wasn't working. Well, actually it was working, but we didn't have any relations. So if I type the same command, so \dt, you can see that now we have 2 tables. So this one is for Flyway specific, which you shouldn't care at this point, but you can see that we have this table right here called person. And if I go ahead and describe person, so \d and then person, you can see that we have this table called person inside of the public schema, and then the ID is of type UID, not null, and then we also have name, and then it's a character varying, and then this is 100. So this is the length, and it's also not null. And this is awesome. So if I go ahead and simply say select and then start from and then person, and that with semicolon, enter, you can see that we have 0 rows. So let's go ahead and simply insert someone. So because I know I need to install an extension to be able to generate UIDs, and also I cover this on my free course, I need to install an extension. So what I want to do basically is this. So select and then UID and then generate and then v4 as a function. And you can see that no function matches. So what we need to do is create extension, and then this will be UID-OSSP. So WID-OSSP. And that with semicolon, enter. You can see that worked. Now, if I pretty much select UID generate version 4, and you can see that now we can generate UIDs. So if I go ahead and simply say insert into, and then person, and then we have ID, and then name, and then values, and then we want to generate a UID, so generate, and then v4, and then the actual name. So let's simply say that this is Maria, and then Jones, and then end that with parentheses and enter. You can see that Maria Jones does not exist, and that's because that has to be single quotes and not double quotes. So Maria Jones like that, enter, and you can see that worked. So let me go ahead and add Tom and then Smith, enter. Now if I select star from person, you can see that now we have 2 people inside of our database, and this is awesome. So we've managed to connect to our database using Spring Boot, and we have a database up and running with a table. And now what we need to do really is just write some code to retrieve data from our database using Spring Boot, or actually using Java and Spring Boot and their API basically. So let me go ahead and collapse this, and inside of the person data access service, so let's go ahead and write some code that will retrieve us everyone from our database. So what we need to do is to use this class right here. So private final and then JDBC template. So what we're going to do is add this to constructor and then auto wire. So this is dependency injection. We don't have to do anything. Spring Boot knows how to initialize correctly this class for us so that we can write some code against our database. So now instead of saying select all people and then return a list, so basically this fake list, what we're going to do is use JDBC template API. So simply go ahead and say JDBC template dot, and you can see that they have various methods. So the one that we want is query. So we want to query, and the query takes 2 things. So we can pass an SQL statement, and then we have to pass a row mapper. So basically the row mapper is how we take the values that we retrieve from our database and then transform that into a Java object. So let me go ahead and simply define a string. So string, and let's go ahead and make this final. Not needed, but why not? So SQL equals to select. So basically it's the same thing that we had. So select name, or actually this is ID, name, and then from, and then person. Not the same. So previously we simply said select star. So right here. So select star. So select, and then ID, name, from person. and this is the same thing. So I prefer to use the actual column names instead of star. So now let's go ahead and simply pass the SQL query. So SQL. And now we have to pass this row mapper. So this row mapper is a lambda that has access to the result set, as well as the index. So what we're going to do inside here, so let's simply go ahead and say return, and then we need to return a person object. So person, so this is our model. And inside of our person, we need to pass what? We need to pass the UID. So this should be new person, just like that. So inside, you can see that we have to pass a UID and also a name. So inside of the result set, we can get the string. So get string. And then you can see that we can pass the column label. So I know the column label is, so basically it's ID. And also we can get the actual name. So result set dot and then get string, and then this will be name. So if I put this on a new line, and you can see exactly what we're doing. So right here you can see that we have an error, and this is because this result set dot get string is a string basically, and what we need is a UID type. So let's simply go ahead UID, and then from string, and then we need that. So that will work. So you can see that now this works. Let's end that with semicolon. And what I like to do is actually to extract this to a variable. So all of that actually. And then this will be ID. And then this will be name. So you see exactly what's happening. And we can remove that. And also that. And then that, and then format everything. So now I don't need to return the list of pretty much just fake people. So this from PostgreSDB is not name, and we are retrieving from a database. So you can see that I still have an error, and this returns a list of people, right? So you can see that it's a list of people. So I can either say return and then people, oops, so people, just like that, or I can simply return that in line. So refactor, and there we go. So you can see that I'm returning that in line, which is awesome. So this is it. So if I now restart the application, so let me go ahead and simply say stop and rerun. There we go. It's up and running. And if I open up Chrome, and then remember, so right here, we previously had an empty list, and this is because it was coming from our fake database. So now if I refresh this, there we go. So you can see that now this is coming from our database, and this is awesome, guys. So you can see the power of Spring Boot. Basically, you can just write code, very fast, and they give you these tools so that you can focus on writing what matters instead of you having to configure things. So there we go. So let me go ahead and simply add someone else into this table. So let's go ahead and simply say Tomcat, or actually not Tomcat. Let's simply say Anna, and then Jamil, and then enter. So if I refresh this, you can see that now we have Anna Jamil. So there we go. If I collapse this, you can see that this is only one implementation of our API, right? So we have a bunch of other methods. So select person by ID. Or actually, let's go ahead and implement this one quickly so you see exactly how this is done. So what you want is to pass, or actually select ID name from person, and then here you can say where, and then ID equals to question mark, And then what you want is to take the exact same thing here and then simply return that. But instead of query, because query returns you a list, what you want is query for and then object. And query for object takes the SQL, but we also need to pass the argument. So new object. So this must be an array. So just like that. And you can see that. So currently this is empty, right? But I need to pass this ID that comes from the client. So ID. And then this, let's rename this because it's already in scope. So person and then ID. And let's rename that to person ID as well. Just like that. And let's actually change this. So this will be a person, right? But what we want really is to return. So return optional dot of nullable, because that can be null, and then pass person, just like that. So basically it's the same thing, but we have this question mark, and then query for object. We pass the ID right here. So if I put this on a new line so you can see exactly what we're doing. So indent that. So we pass the SQL, the ID, and basically if you had more arguments, you'd simply pass them right here. So we have the ID, and then this is the row mapper as you saw before. So right here. And then we simply return the optional of nullable of person, because you know, we might not find a student with a given ID. So if I restart this and then open up Chrome, so if I refresh, you can see that this still works. But if I now take this ID and then pretty much do / and then ID, remove the quotes there, enter, and you can see that now we only get one person. And this is awesome. So there we go. So you can see that we managed to connect to a database using Docker, Postgres, Flyway, Spring JDBC, and you can see that this was pretty much, you know, very straightforward. And we even managed to use Ikari. So I didn't even explain what Ikari was, but Ikari is the actual recommended data source that you should be using for Spring Boot, because it's very fast, reliable, and yeah, it's just one of the best ones out there. So there we go, guys. If you have any questions on this, and basically I'm going to let you implement the rest of the logic. So insert person, the same with delete, and then update. But basically it is straightforward using some SQL. So go ahead and pretty much just subscribe to my channel to get more videos like this. If you want to learn more about all of this and more, so I've got a Spring Boot full stack web development course where I teach all of this and a lot more, and also creating a user interface for this using React.js and hooks, and pretty much it's a lot of content packed into one course, where I'm pretty sure that once you learn that, you will be able to build applications on your own and also apply for jobs, because a lot of companies are looking for Spring Boot developers, or you know, Java developers, but Spring Boot is used quite a lot in the industry. And once you know all of these skills, so dependency injection, connecting to databases, writing tests, writing integration tests, writing user interface for it, I'm pretty sure that you will be able to get a job. This is all for now. Make sure to subscribe to my channel to get more videos like this. If you have any requests or any other topic that you want me to cover, go ahead and drop me a message and I'll do my best to make a video on the topic. This is all for now. I'll catch you on the next one. See ya.